I don't want to engage in a play of words that some people do, in the Sunday musings, like, so on. But, be concerned. And we have to raise those concerns now, lest we forget Gethsemane.
Leader of the Culture News, Mr. Rowley, taking into consideration the President's utterances at the National Teachers Conference, specifically that he will be foolish to call local government elections now, we can consider local government elections off the table. Being the only elections possibly coming is general elections based on the no confidence motion. Has PPP moved more to focusing on preparing for general elections, and how is the in-house stuff coming, as in any candidates as yet?
Well, the prelude to your question, obviously, would be your analysis.
But he said he would not be calling.
No. You gave a sort of analysis.
Okay.
You gave a sort of an analysis in respect to the president's statement. I'm saying that the prelude to your question is obviously your analysis. Okay.
Is your analysis in sync with my analysis?
No, not necessarily. But I wouldn't want to elaborate on that. That analysis of internal party matters.
Okay.
Now, we have said time and time again that we are prepared for any elections. At this very press conferences, we have said time and time again that be it local government and be it local government elections or general and regional, the party machinery is geared to confront any one of them. You see, a political party has to have a very nimble approach in respect to these situations. See, you don't gear yourself only for local government elections. What if your analysis is right and general elections are called? So what are you going to do? Scramble? No. The party machinery is so geared and so flexible that it can be prepared for any eventuality.
Okay, follow up, Mr. Roy. You said that you had a somewhat of a problem with GCOM saying that it's prepared, but still you don't know what is the level up to what point it's prepared.
Yes.
You keep saying that you're prepared, but I'm still not getting from you what is your preparedness all about? What has the party done to prepare itself so far for any form of election?
Now, your level of understanding in respect to preparedness seems to be the following: that GCOM's preparedness must be mutatis mutandis with the PPP's preparedness, or vice versa. No, ma'am. GCOM has its own timetable. The PPP, as a political party, has its own timetable. Our timetable, let's say, with respect to organizing public meetings, going to hold bottom-house meetings, our internal preparations, and so many other things, doesn't necessarily have to fit in with GCOM's timetable.
I get that. What I'm trying to get from you
So
is what
there's
has
no,
the party done
just a
to
minute,
prepare so
madam,
far?
just a minute, please.
Okay.
Un minuto, por favor. Listen. There's no contradiction between GCOM's non-preparedness and our preparedness. There's no contradiction between the two. They are two separate and distinct processes. Here is a political party preparing for any eventuality. Here is an organization, a body called GCOM, that ought to also be ready for either of the two. We are not, that is what we are not sure about, whether they are ready for local government elections. And we spoke to that last week, because local government elections require the preparation of a particular type of voters list, unlike the voters list that ought to be ready, like the OLE we mentioned here, the official list of electors, in respect of general and regional elections. What we are learning from our people on the ground, you see, is that, number one, there are a number of legal lacuna that is yet to be addressed by GCOM. There are a number of institutional capacity building issues that GCOM has not addressed as yet. and we've spoken to some of them here. Then there are a number of other mandatory issues, just such as the question of a list linked or reflective of the NDCs. Okay, so the two are not necessarily contradictory.
Sorry. But what has PPP done so far to prepare for elections? What about campaigns, pointing out the front people? What has been done so far to prepare for elections?
Well, we've done a lot of things, but you know, still waters run deep. I read an article by Mr. Harris this weekend where he quoted a number of different favorite tunes of mine. So I would like to reciprocate in answering that while on the surface we may not be appearing to be doing much, you can rest assured that we're doing a lot on the ground.
Okay, I'm not finished, sorry.
No, but you can't dominate the press conference.
No, but it's one question. It's just you took long to answer. It's one
We'll
question.
get the last one from that.
Last two. Okay. Mr. Roy, about the last 5 press conferences you
No, no,
spoke.
hold on a minute. You said I took long to answer. He says, I'm hosting this.
Yes.
I'm
Yes,
hosting
sir.
this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's lay down the ground rules. Go ahead.
Good. For the last 45 press conferences, you spoke about Mr. Francois.
Mr. Who?
Mr. Francois.
Oh, okay.
At this one, you didn't. Has there been any change? Is the PPP in any way satisfied? Are you backing off from it? Are you going to allow it to be? What's it about?
No, there'd be no change. The French would call it changement. There'd be no changement. The position remains the same. We hope there's no change for the worse. There could always be a change for the better. But
But you have gotten no response from GCAM so far, no official response.
we have received a response. We have received a response from Mr. Surbali indicating to us how they went about selecting Mr. Francois. And in the letter, at the terminal part of the letter, he gave a kind of a, I would say, measured assurance that Mr. Francois' performance will be evaluated as time goes by. I think that's another tune. That's a favorite of mine.
And did that rest well with PPP? Are you okay with that?
Oh no, not at all. Not at all. We're not prepared to compromise on our position with respect to Mr. Francois' employment.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Then.
Mr. Roy.
Yes,
Mr.
it's
Roy. Sir, a question outside of the subject matter.
Is it Caribbean News Desk or Demar Wales? Or both?
It's like Banks the age of Pepsi
No man saying of Pepsi.
Cola. Coca-Cola.
You see?
Let's deal with the statement. and then
So
we
it's
can
not
go
only
to that.
ministers can suffer from a senior moment. Yes, Mr. Shobral.
You'll permit a question outside of the subject matter.
Well, unless the journalists
I have an answer.
are prepared to cede to your
Well, you can go on out.
own treaty.
You got one.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Mr. Regional for Guyana Times.
Mhm.
There is a concern of the PPP that attacking GCOM.
There is
because-
what?
Concern
Uh-huh.
that the PPP is attacking GCOM because they are fearful of going to elections. The party is
Because what?
The party is fearful of going to elections. How do you respond?
Rubbish.
That's it.
That's it.
My question is, the PPP had these amount of concerns in previous years when at general elections, or is this the first time that GCOM is so far back that the PPP has this amount of concerns?
See, we always have concern, but it has
To
been
this amount.
it has been raising those things. Maybe the media wasn't as alert as it was at that time, and they're more sensitive to the issues now. You see, but we can show volumes of correspondence where we have been raising these issues time and time again at every election with GCOM. We have concerns on our lists, personnel, ballot boxes, polling station, printing of ballot papers. Adam could give you a full review if you were to
Okay.
walk into his office and ask him to give you some background information on these matters.
I just might do that. So
Okay,
you're
okay.
saying that this is a constant thing with GCOM every time we have elections.
Oh yes, yes, yeah, we don't have a problem with that.
You don't mind.
That's our duty. Once we
To
are
have to be behind GCOM every time.
once we are contesting the elections and we want to make sure that we have a certain comfort level, it's our responsibility and duty to raise these things. It doesn't matter to us whether the opposition are raising these things or not. That's their business. If they want to raise, if they don't want to raise, fine. They have a comfort level, that's okay for them. But we also, it's like a game of cricket, we want to make sure that the rules are not stacked against us. That's all we're doing. We're not doing anything to upset anybody's apple cart or mango cart.
Mr. Rowley, to what extent does the party believe that Mr. Vandalal should be asked to step down?
To what extent what?
Does the PPP believe that that the Attorney General should be asked to step down or be dismissed and probably be censured by the PPP's decision-making body or the remarks that were contained in the recording?
Well, first of all, you have to tell me what must be the basis before we talk about extent. We must talk about the basis for which he should step down. I haven't heard that. You simply asked about to what extent are we. Well, that's a relative word.
The basis is widely publicized in the media based on the content of the recording.
That's the basis on
Yes.
which he should step down.
Yes. I'm asking.
If that is the basis on which he should step down, then I should have stepped down long ago. Because the media also developed a basis for me to step down.
Follow up, please. Mr. Roy, you see no basis for him to step down? Outside of what Mr. Shabani said, did you
Well,
see any basis?
I think there's a police investigation that is going on into a matter. And I think that there are certain matters that are also before the court. And then also, we think that the government has issued a statement on the matter. We want the government to hold firmly to its position. We would be very disappointed if the government was to cede to any blackmailing tactics on the part of the persons who are making certain allegations against the Attorney General. We understand that one element of the blackmailing tactic is that they have more recordings to be published.
You never said that.
I said we understand. I never said it was quoted as saying. I said we understand that they said that there are more revelations to be made in respect to recordings of political personalities. And our position on that is, if there are more recordings, well, let the recording be released.
Mr. Rowley, a quick follow-up. To what extent do you believe that based on the transcript and the actual recording, that by the PPP standards, that is ethical behavior?
On this issue, there are many who've had their say. There are many who have had their take on this matter. I've been following the debate and the intervention very closely. And many have pronounced, either by way of letters, press statements, press conferences, comments, interviews, the whole gamut. But there's one thing I must say about all that has been said so far. And that is that all that has been said so far is biased and negative and aimed at lynching Mr. Nandalal. The only I would say balanced statement that I've seen so far is the one that was issued by the government as soon as this thing broke. But everybody else has spoken, and you know, I mean, I've read the document. I've read the document, something was sent to me, sent by Mr. Glenroy, and I made a note of 12 points, which I believe, in my own deliberate judgment, points to issues that have not caught the attention of sections of the media, sections of the commentators, in the same way as the other elements have. And that's a good reflection of how, you know, I wouldn't say public opinion, because that might be misinterpreted. It's sections of the media is interpreting this matter. Take, for example, number one, he asked the question, and he puts it, that if his uncle did something wrong, then his uncle is liable to face the consequences of it. We should quote that. Next, says that your newspaper should not be used to drag innocent people into this matter. We should use that. He goes on to say that the man is not, like everybody else, above the law, and that is how society should work. We should quote that. He goes on to say that he doesn't want the newspaper to publish things about his wife because she has nothing to do with the matter, that she's innocent. The newspaper should publish that. He goes on to say that he's clean, meaning corruption, and he's never taken anything from anybody to further his cause, and he's not a thief. The newspaper should publish that. And then he says that their efforts afoot to lynch his family for no reason at all. The newspaper should publish that. He repeats that nobody is above the law. And he concludes, among other things, by saying that whatever he's doing, he has no ulterior motive. Those are some of the things that I picked up that have not been given the type of coverage and reference to in respect to the quote-unquote recording. And I come back to this question again of balanced and objective reporting. We cannot only be talking about one aspect, picking out like out of a bowl of spaghetti, the issues which we think will turn the minds or influence the minds of public opinion in a particular way, but making no reference to these other issues as well. So I'm saying that in the play of things, my reading of all that has been said so far is in one direction. These issues that I've pointed to have not been captured. And I would like to see, in the interest of balancing out things, objectively reporting matters, that these are matters that should be reported to, because if this matter ends up in court or wherever it goes, it will be looked at from all the angles. From all the angles. And I suppose many of you here are UG graduates. When you're writing your UG papers or your dissertations, you can't simply write one side of the analysis or the issue you're analyzing. You have to write objectively, or the professor will throw it out. But it seems to me that when we get, into these issues, The editorial policy is what dictates what the journalist should write.
Sir,
Or the profit margin.
You didn't answer my question.
No, that's how I would prefer to answer the question.
So it's not unethical.
That is the way I would prefer to answer the question. If you are to take all that I have said in its totality, if you were to take all that I have said in its totality, it would answer your question. In the same way, if you were to take all that has been said on the other side of the story in its totality, you will end up asking the question that you're asking. Inherent in that there's some unethical business inside. So let us look at this thing logically. Let us look at this thing logically, as unbiased as we can, in order to formulate in our own minds what is really happening here.
But did Mr. Nandel at any point in time indicate to you that as Minister of Home Affairs, that he was aware of a possible plan that could result in the injury or any attack on the Kite News?
I would prefer not to fuel that school of thought. The question you're asking is, you are asking me to contribute to the fueling of a particular school of thought on this matter. I am seeking, at my level best, to develop another school of thought on this matter which gives the other side of the coin, because we all admit every story sometimes has 2 or 3 sides. I am not prepared to lay myself at the altar of that side that has been painted over and over again at the expense of not looking at the other side of the coin. That's all that I'm doing.
well, have you set out to investigate the threat mentioned by Mr. Nandel?
I have no investigating arm in the People's Progressive Party. The Guyana Police Force, I understand, has invited in Mr. Glenlal, has invited in Mr. Mr. Girdari for discussions or to make statements or to take statements from them. How that process is going, I cannot say at this point in time. But the last word I had from Mr. Prasad, who is the head of the police force, and the CID, who has the authority to carry out any type of investigation, not the PPP, into especially this matter which has been deemed in certain circles as a criminal offense. And there are 2 sides to this. This is the wiretapping and intercept of communications side of it, and there's the threat side of it too. So, police obviously has a role to play when it comes to such matters.
Oh,
Capital News. Sir, outside of the 12 points that you mentioned that you notice is that is underreported or not reported, do you support the other statements by the Attorney General?
What statement was that?
The ones outside of the 12 points that you mentioned.
It's not a question of, it's not a question of support or non-support.
Are you completely in
I
support of the Attorney
no,
General?
I want to focus on those issues that I made reference to. I am not going to allow myself to go into that arena which has had a field day already to such an extent that some people believe that it's believable.
We don't believe that.
I am not going there. I am not going there. In the same way as those who had a field day and that area choose not to go where I want to go. They have chosen that they are not going there because they have not pronounced on those matters.
Could I have
And
follow-up
that's a
answer
fact.
on-
That's a fact.
Could I have a follow-up on one of the points you mentioned then?
Okay.
Where Mr. Nandla says he's not a thief. How would you define a thief?
A thief is someone who would have You know, the Bible says on one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, property, goods, or whatever the case may be. So, you know, if I have this microphone and I work hard to earn it, and it's in my home or it's in my personal self, and Mr. X seeks to come to take the cell phone away from me by force, which doesn't belong to him, the PIN number is registered in my name, etc., etc., and he seeks to deprive me of my personal property, that is a matter of theft.
So the Attorney General is saying that he has taken money that did not belong to him is not stealing?
Chief, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. I don't want
All right, let's move on. Let's move on. Last question on this matter. We'll permit you, and then we're moving on. Last.
I got one question, but it's straightforward. Ms. Roy, Ms. Harris asked if you're investigating. You know that there's no investigative arm, but you do have
No.
of the PPP.
When he asked that question,
Mr.
Mr. Harris asked that question,
If you're investigating.
I assume, because he didn't say yea or nay or corrected me, that he was asking that question to me in my capacity as the Minister of Home Affairs.
Oh, but I'm asking you now in your capacity as PPP General Secretary.
Yes.
Does this party have an investigative arm?
We have a disciplinary committee.
That's it.
That's not
What
an
is that
investigating arm, though.
True, but what is that committee doing about this? Is that committee looking into this matter?
No, that matter hasn't gone there. That
How-
matter hasn't gone
What
there.
is the process for that matter to go?
The executive committee makes such a decision.
Okay, and just a follow-up to that. Mr. Rohi, you said that you focus on these 12 points, but in putting these 12 points you made into perspective, the minister said that he has no ulterior motives, but that was when he was asking for a young lady's number to whom he referred to as a thing. He said he's not a thief, but that's just after he said that he took some money out from the government and he put it back. But Glenn Lal is trying to lynch him for that and blackmailing him. He said that all the things that he said is after he put himself into a place that he had to defend it. So that point I want you to look at. And secondly, you said that the government issued, so far the government is the only body that issued a balanced statement. Could you tell me what exactly about the government statement was balanced, as in looking at both sides of the situation?
Well, you're the journalist. I'm the politician. I think you're best positioned to speak about objectivity and balanced reporting. Fair, objective, and balanced reporting. That's the mantra of any professional journalist. So, to me, I would sort of give the professional journalists the advantage on speaking professionally to such matters. If a politician usually is to expand on such matters, you know, it's seen in a political context.
Okay, Mr. Roy, speaking from inside information, I know that 99% of the persons that work at Kaiju News, they're Guyanese citizens. We have one Haitian, but no matter
She's
what.
Guyanese.
Asian.
She is
Anyhow,
Guyanese.
but these citizens are you as a Minister of Home Affairs, you have a responsibility to them too. And as Mr. Nanalal said about his wife, who's innocent, there are a lot of innocent people working at Kaiju News. Are you not at all concerned about these people?
Those, whatever concerns I have, are being addressed by the Guyana Police Force.
All right, let's move on from this question. I won't take any more.
Would you
No,
Mr. Roy, permit me?
no, let's
As-
move.
No, let him go ahead.
Thank you.
Mm.
Mr. Roy, how do you see the PP recovering from this?
Recovery?
Yes.
What has happened that make us sickly?
Well, clearly it is not putting the party in a good light.
Well, put it that.
One of your central committee members is being accused of knowing of a possible threat, armed attack on a newspaper.
Gentlemen,
Let me welcome you to this PBP weekly press conference. Sorry for the late start. We had some other emergencies. But with me here, as usual, is our General Secretary. He will be reading 3 statements, after which he will be taking questions. Yes?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My apologies for the late start. The first statement reads as follows. The People's Progressive Party commends President Donald Ramatara and his PPPC administration for hosting yet another two-shows conference at the National Conference Center. This is an indication of the importance played by the PPPC administration on Amerindian and hinterland development, which for years, under colonialism and for over 2 decades under the previous PNC administration, was neglected and pushed into the backwater of the developmental process. The conference provided an opportunity for Amerindian leaders to interface with the President and other policymakers at the national and regional levels as they seek collaboratively to address issues, to find solutions to challenges faced by the two shows of their respective communities. The conference had in attendance sector ministers and senior government officials, which provided for timely responses to issues raised. From all indications, the conference was a huge success and was greatly appreciated and valued by the two shows and all those who participated. There can be no doubt that Amerindian development had been greatly accelerated by a menu of measures initiated by the PPPC government, which over the years have had a transformative effect on the lives and well-being of our Amerindian brothers and sisters. Amerindians are no longer second-class citizens, as was the case under the PNC regime, but are now an integral part of our national development process, and more particularly in the development of their own communities. The PPP is proud of the role played by our two shows in the development of their respective communities, and wish them every success as they seek to further improve the quality of life of our Amerindian people. The PPP takes this opportunity to pledge its continuing support to our Amerindian leaders and the peoples as a whole of the hinterland in their continuing drive to improve their lives. The next statement reads as follows. The People's Progressive Party notes with concern GCOM's haste in the recruitment and training of polling day staff. Much to our disappointment is the total lack of communication and disregard for the major political stakeholders, which has raised serious questions over the transparency of GCOM's recruitment practices. The party wishes to remind GCOM that at the 2012 retreat, GCOM committed itself to pay careful attention and enhance the involvement of the political parties to avoid the numerous partisan behavior and attitude in its polling day staff. Yet, this seems to be just rhetoric, given the manner how the recruitment and selection process are proceeding presently. Further, the party calls on GCOM to make public the list of persons selected, the areas of training undergone, and the selection of policies/criteria used to shortlist and appoint staff. The party shares this concern due to the many persons that have approached our party offices and leaders registering their disappointment with the selection process and the non-communication of GCOM, even though many have surpassed the requirements requested. The Guyanese people are curious to know whether the persons selected demonstrate proper and adequate representation of all our people. The party is curious to know the contents of GCOM's training, be it for general or local government elections, and how it is in this decision was taken, considering the AFC's no confidence motion and APNU's sponsored protest countrywide, countrywide damp protests for local government elections. One is left to wonder what training was conducted with these persons, taking into consideration the dilemma the country is placed in by the combined opposition. Surprisingly, the opposition seems to be in a state of hibernation when it comes to GCOM affairs. Yet the AFC is trying to reconvene Parliament to table a no confidence motion, and APNU's obsession for local government elections grows deeper with every passing day. Considering this, and that there has not been a single statement on GCOM's preparations for elections from the opposition, is it that they are privileged, that they are privy to privileged information, and that is restricted from the PPP, or are they huffing and puffing without oxygen? Further, the PPP wishes to express its concerns over the release of the official list of electors. It was expected that the OLE would have been made available by October 30th, 2014. However, to date, the PPP is still awaiting their copies or a definitive word from GCOM on the position as it relates to the official list of electors. One would have thought that with the controversial appointment of a new public relations officer, the nation would have been updated on these matters, yet we remain in the same blinded position. The political parties cannot be removed from the process, and it is GCOM's responsibility to allow for full scrutiny of key aspects of its work. We cannot have scrutiny on the part of government and non-scrutiny on the part of other institutions related to the question of governance. The chairman and members of GCOM must reflect on the role played by the political parties in keeping with the law with regards to the appointment of the commission. Guyana is unique, and so are the laws of our country. Maybe it is a good time for the chairman and members of GCOM to have another look at the laws and to so remind themselves. The PPP wishes to remind GCOM that it is a major stakeholder in elections held at any time in this country, under its mandate, and is always ready and willing to participate in whatever elections-related activities once it is an interest of all Guyanese. The last statement is as follows. The People's Progressive Party is heartened at the recent resolution of the conflict which had plagued Guyana football for the past few years. We take this opportunity to congratulate the Naturalization Committee installed by FIFA and CONCACAF and urge that over the next 9 months, the committee works so as to return the sport to its rightful place in Guyana. While we understand there is much work to be done over the next few months, we urge the Naturalization Committee to not be distracted and remain focused on the task ahead. We would also like to urge all stakeholders to lend their support that is necessary to aid the committee in executing its mandate. The PPP remains optimistic about the future of football in Guyana. Sports is an imperative element in uniting our people, and the party, as the political party which represents the largest single bloc of Guyanese, we therefore stand ready to support any efforts aimed at promoting unity and goodwill among our people. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes. Now we're looking for questions. Who want to ask the first question?
Remarks.
Neil?
I just want to ask Neil Marks, yes, is normalization can be naturalization.
Normalization, okay. Thank you for the correction. So football department that wrote that, so.
So, I'd like to ask about the whole question of GCOM and electoral readiness. The president of the country normally identifies the date for any election. So why is the party so concerned that GCOM might be prepared for an election that hasn't even been sanctioned by the president?
Well, put it this way. I don't think it's the sanctioning of the date that is that critical at this point in time. It is important, but what is important also is a date linked to the process. There is a pre-elections process and there's a post-elections process. The pre-elections process has to do with all the things that we've mentioned here over the past few months. The preparation of the list, the preparation of the selection of persons, a whole host of issues, many of which I do not recall right now. But those slew of matters that we've raised at our press conferences constitute, by their very nature, the pre-electoral, part and parcel of the pre-electoral process that ought to be in place, so that as soon as a date is announced, there's no mad scramble to put those things in place. The training has to take place now, the selection has to take place now, the machinery has to up and ready, you know, the laws, whatever has to be amended, and so forth. So the process leading up to elections is what we are concerned about, or what we have been talking about. The election day process is another stage in the pre-electoral process. This is the question of the printing of the ballot papers, the selection of polling stations, the selection of the returning officer, the presiding officers, the poll clerks, and things like that. That stage has and brings with it its own challenges, which we are not prepared to talk about at this point in time. When we approach that stage, then we will begin to pronounce on it. And then we have the post-election process, which I've made reference to, of the retreat that was held by GCOM at the Grand Coastal, where they published a lengthy document pointing to some of the slippages or the deficiencies in the system which they hope to correct. So the announcement of the date presupposes that GCOM would have done all these pre-electoral steps to ensure that when the date is announced, even though a few months would be ahead before the actual elections are held, many of these things can be completed in 6 months. And that is why, for example, the preparation of the voters list can't be completed in 6 months. It has to be an ongoing exercise. And, you know, these are the issues which we have been focusing on. You would have noted we haven't raised anything about polling stations and ballot boxes and all those things at this point in time. We don't want to be too previous or presumptuous, so to speak. So we are, as they say in some circles, we are moving with the flow. As the GCOM addresses certain issues, we keep a watching brief on those issues, and we pronounce on them, obviously after we will have done our homework, and depending on the levels of satisfaction that we have encountered in respect to them.
But on the other side, sir, the president will not call it until GCOM says it's ready. So if GCOM goes to the president and says, we are ready, then all these things will be in place. There is no indication or inclination that elections will be held anytime soon. So why is the party so worried about what's happening at GCOM?
Well, we are a major stakeholder in the process, Mr. Harris.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as I said before, we don't want when all these things, time for all these things. And you see, every step in GCOM has a timeline.
Mm-hmm.
They are time bound. So we have to bear in mind those timelines as we raise these issues, because we would not wish where a timeline would have passed and we did not take the opportunity to raise with GCOM, and then we would have begun to wring our hands, regretting that we did not raise it with them. So I don't know if worry is the right word, you know, to say that we are worried. We are concerned that, and